Welcome into the Odds and Audibles podcast. I'm Matt Preem, Eric Scopel on the show as always. And today we welcome in one of our favorite guests, Adam Munsterteiger of Buffstamped, who covers the Colorado Buffaloes for 24/7 Sports. Adam, how are you doing? Have you recovered from another crazy finish of Colorado football last week?
I don't know if you ever recover on the Coach Prime beat out here in Boulder. It's been nonstop since he got hired because you got to go all the way back to just the roster overhaul, which had never been done at the Power 5 level the way that Coach Prime and the Buffs did. So it was players coming and going every day. Then you get into spring ball, and there was another wave. And obviously their high school recruiting efforts have improved a lot more. So it's kind of new territory for me. You know, I'm used to picking up the phone and calling 3-star guys, and now they're in for blue chip guys. So it's just a complete 180. Carl Durrell, I've always said, is a good human being. He's a guy, if I could pick my neighbor, it would be Carl Durrell. But man, he was so boring. And so to go from that with just two of us on the road covering this team, it was just me and Brian Howell on those road press conferences before, to what it is now, where you can't go anywhere around those facilities without seeing massive cameras because they're filming a documentary. And, you know, last week, 60 Minutes was in town. College Game Day was in town. I mean, it's crazy the amount of attention that Colorado's garnered. And you know, they drew in 25.2 million viewers through the first 3 games, which it's just crazy. I feel like I'm living in a movie covering this program, to be honest with you.
I think Eric's going to go big picture for you a little bit there, but you also talked on a couple topics I wanted to hit on right away of just take us through this past offseason. We could do a whole podcast. We could probably do 5 podcasts on this whole offseason for Colorado football, what it was like, but more so of just a lot of stuff was seen on social media, whether it was because of the documentary teams that are around Colorado that put stuff out, or it's just random social media stuff that gets found and goes viral. We know social media doesn't always tell the true story, if at all. How was the offseason for Colorado? There was certainly a lot of scrutiny around it externally. Internally, how has it been received? Is it too early to call this a huge success that more schools should do, moving forward, because they are 3-0 and they are in the top 25? And like you just said, 25 million people have seen them watch or have seen them play college football the first 3 weeks of the year.
Yeah, I don't think it's a blueprint you're really going to be able to follow because Deion Sanders is just different. You know, I've said I think there's maybe only 2, maybe 3 people on the planet that could have done what he did at Colorado, you know, coming off last year, 1-11, the worst FBS program. Maybe Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, maybe. But, I mean, Deion Sanders is just a name that even if, you know, the younger generation isn't as familiar, their parents are going to inform them because, you know, he was a transformational talent at the cornerback position. So I don't know if you're another program rebuilding, you can really take what Colorado's done and how they've been able to rebuild so quickly. But and Coach Prime did, you know, take some criticism for that first team meeting and basically telling guys to hit the portal. But, you know, I covered that team last year. Somebody needed to come in to those facilities with a sledgehammer and just, I mean, the infrastructure was there, the facilities were there, but everything else needed to pretty much change. There had been a losing mentality outside of 2016. Colorado just has not enjoyed success in the last 15 years. Wanted to finish their career were basically booted out, but they're 3-0 right now, and it's because this coaching staff came in, made tough decisions, and used the buzz to their advantage. You know, that you talked about the social media videos. Deion Sanders is a marketing genius with the way that he gets his message out there. And a lot of times in the press conference, if he goes back at a reporter, he's not really going at them. He's just trying to get a certain message out. So he's just really savvy in that sense, and he knows how to sell Colorado football.
Adam, you said something in the opening that I want to come back to, which is that you feel like you're in a movie, you're in the big screen covering this program. And that's so interesting. I've thought about you a lot throughout this offseason, in part because I know you're working your tail off with the 100 probably transfer portal stories. Did you ever get a final count of how many you wrote for incoming and outgoing? Do you have an idea? It's got to be close to, it's got to be like 130 or something, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's more than 70 new scholarship players.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, it's well into the hundreds for sure.
It's such a unique situation. I guess what I'm curious about is your exposure to Coach Prime, which is, I'm sure, unique to a lot of people. Are obviously fascinated by this. You've been around him since he arrived in Boulder and have been able to take stock. Like, maybe what are some, I don't know if you want to say personal anecdotes, but like, what are some things about him that maybe an Oregon fan especially doesn't know about him going into this week that maybe would interest them?
Well, it was interesting. Shortly after his introductory press conference, Coach Prime asked the sports information director, "Hey, bring me the people that have been around here on this beat." And so we had kind of an informal off the record meeting with him. And it was great just to kind of get through that barrier because as much as you try to be professional in this gig, I'm a human being. Deion Sanders was a hero when I was a kid. So to be able to break through that barrier, I thought that meeting really set the tone as far as that went. And my first impression then is that, in those settings, he's not prime time. He's Deion. He's more down, he's not as flashy and really talks to you and wants to get to know you. And so I was really impressed with that. I think because of the flash that Deion Sanders, this Coach Prime mantra, has taken on, that people lose sight of the fact that, he's doing this for the right reasons. Deion Sanders does not need to be a college head coach, but he loves reaching young people. And it's not just about coaching his sons. He's taken Travis Hunter is basically a son of his now. And so he's done that with a number of players where he's really become a father figure in their life. And so he's done it the right way. And I know it rubs some people the wrong way just because it comes out brash sometimes, but I've been really impressed with just the quality of the human being that he is.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, like, having preconceived notions, but even watching today's press conference, which you were obviously a part of, like, you can see that part you mentioned there about how much he cares about his guys and how he talks about them. And I don't know if that's what people who are from the periphery have kind of understood, because I think there's just been maybe a lot of unfair criticism, probably maybe some fair criticism. But here's a question kind of along the same things. Is, you mentioned the transfer portal and the process they did to kind of rebuild this, which is, again, never been seen in this sport before, in part because the portal is still relatively new. What are some things maybe that people don't give enough credit to for Deion or for Prime in terms of how he's rebuilt this? Because it's pretty easy now to say, oh, it's just this or it's that. But I know it's a lot more nuanced. There's a lot more pieces. So what are people maybe missing about what makes this so impressive?
Well, he's a good football coach, and it's not just about his celebrity. He put together a strong staff, and it was interesting. Midway through the TCU game, I turned to a colleague and I said, Colorado's the more disciplined, better coached team, and they're going against a team that was in the national championship game a year ago.
Right.
And this is a brand new Colorado roster. So there was, I don't know if you saw the press conference after the TCU game, but Coach Prime kind of went at Ed Werder a little bit because he had quote tweeted something about him being a celebrity coach. And Coach Prime took exception to that. It's frustrated when people view him as just that and don't give him respect, in terms of the X's and O's. It's been kind of an up and down non-conference play. Colorado has not really put together a full game yet. So there are definitely a lot of issues they got to shore up. But generally, this has looked like a well-coached football team out there.
Adam, I think it's safe to say that the fan base has been energized. The program has been energized. Like you said, last week's game against Colorado State, there was 9.3 million people watching that game. When it ended, it was almost 3 a.m. East Coast time. That is absolutely a mind-boggling number. It blows away any other 7:30 kickoff time slot window ESPN has had. There's been multiple sellouts. I don't know. Are all the games sold out at Colorado now this season?
They just today sold out their final home game. So it's the first time in the program's history that they've done that. Only one other time had they even sold out 5 of the 6 home games. So yeah, record numbers in terms of everything. I mean, their spring game was sold out and they sold tickets. In the past, you didn't have to pay to get in and you would be able to count the number of people at the spring game. So it really is a 180, just an incredible change.
So the reason I wanted to go here was this time last year when we had you on, the program wasn't just disarray. No one cared really. You talked about like people have gotten past the point of caring that they were bad, and it's just, oh, this is who they are. Can you just, for the community, can you just explain how this has changed and what is it like covering a team that has gone from a point where no one cared if they lost in less than a year now? All the games are sold out. Everyone's watching. And yes, Deion Sanders, the name, has a huge factor in this. But they are legitimately good. Like they could be more than just an average bowl caliber team. Like they're going to be in play for a solid bowl game, if not more. What has just this transformation experience been like, just from your perspective and the community's perspective? I imagine it's just crazy.
Yeah, kind of going back a year, the last time I talked with you guys, there was a feeling of apathy and real strong frustration, not only because Karl Dorrell in that era ended up being a failure, but also because there were transfer restrictions which were keeping it from Colorado being able to bring guys in from the portal. The vast majority of guys that they would do an academic evaluation on from the portal during Karl Dorrell's tenure at Colorado came back rejected by the academic folks. And so before Coach Prime got hired, we're in the media out here talking about the fact that it doesn't really matter who they hire as their next head coach, that as long as they can't bring guys in from the transfer portal, they're just not going to be able to compete. And so Colorado's brass, the president, chancellor, athletic director, worked together to create this pilot program, which allowed Coach Prime to do that. And Coach Prime would not be the head coach at Colorado had they not had that pilot program to bring transfers in. So that was kind of the beginning of there actually being hope. And then just in terms of the actual national interest in Colorado, I think partly Colorado's kind of an underdog story, right? Going 1-11 last year, the over under for them going into the season was 3.5 wins. So the national folks just weren't going to give Coach Prime much of a chance to have success in year one. And so, and then just all the exposure that they give through social media, it allows people that maybe they didn't have a college football team, but they start tuning into all the behind the scenes footage and they grow an attachment to certain players on the team. It's a fun environment that Coach Prime has created. And I think people are kind of glomming onto that. It does rub some people the wrong way because it's unconventional. It's not the way that it's supposed to be done, right? Not the way that other programs do. But Coach Prime is an unconventional person because he didn't get into coaching until that long ago. So he's more willing to think outside of the box. And it's just created an attachment, I think, to this program from folks around the country.
Talked a lot about how this has been kind of an unparalleled year for Colorado football. I imagine there hasn't been an athlete like Shedeur in a long time. I mean, I would imagine Cordell Stewart way back when. I mean, there have been some really good players since mixed in, but like I imagine his Q rating, you can tell me what I'm wrong, is like through the roof in Boulder and in the state, and it just in terms of the fan base and the way he's played so far. I'll let you speak to that, but also like him as a player, what surprised you? Like, did you expect the transition to be this seamless? Because coming from FCS football to now, I think PFF has him as the number 2 graded quarterback in the entire country and the top in the conference, in this conference, which has all sorts of guys. Like, what's allowed that to happen? Because it's pretty, again, unparalleled.
Yeah, well, to your point, Colorado hasn't had a quarterback drafted into the NFL since 1997. So, and if you look at the quarterback play in Boulder the last couple seasons with JT Shrout and Brennan Lewis, I mean, it was arguably the worst in the country. So again, a complete 180. I did expect a lot of this out of Shedeur just because of everything we had heard since the second he got in Boulder. And, sometimes until you see it in the game, you're a little reluctant to buy it 100%. But you asked anybody around Colorado football off the record about Shedeur, and there was no hesitation that he was going to be on an elite level as a quarterback this year. And that's why I was a little bit more had higher expectations for this team than the national prognosticators, again, with that 3.5 over under. It was because Shedeur Sanders is not going to let this team have a losing record. That's just not in his DNA. You saw in their game against Colorado State, they had the ball at their own 2-yard line with a couple minutes left. And I don't know if Shedeur Sanders heart rate even went up. He's just such a calm competitor out there and really good in those clutch situations. And so he's somebody that Colorado has not had a quarterback now. They have had Sefo Lufa, who is a warrior. Steven Montez had some physical gifts, but to have the full package at the quarterback position, it's been probably back to Cordell in his career at CU.
Beyond Shedeur, they are more than just him. They've got two dynamic receivers. I was going to say three with Travis Hunter, but unfortunately he's not playing in this game, which really sucks because I was hoping to see him play, as was most Duck fans. Dan Lanning was really disappointed that he got hurt and was bummed and was really hoping for a speedy recovery. But can you just give us some insight into who Colorado has that Shedeur is targeting at, whether it's receiver, whether it's tight end, running back? This group is pretty dynamic. You can't be an elite offense like this with just a quarterback. You got to have special talent around him as well. Yeah,
Jimmy Horn Jr. and Xavier Weaver are 1 and 2 in the Pac-12 in receptions per game right now. And they both transferred in from USF, where they both enjoyed a lot of individual success there, but didn't get the team success. And so they transferred to come and play. And it was a smart decision to transfer to come into play for Shedeur because he usually puts the ball on the money. And yeah, those are both really solid guys. A new guy that kind of emerged late in that Colorado State game was tight end Mikey Harrison, who was actually a walk-on receiver in the program this spring. They converted him to tight end because Shedeur Traore, a big tight end that they brought in, decided not to stick around, and he hit the portal again. So they needed somebody to step up there, and it ended up being this walk-on, and he scored 14 of Colorado's final 17 points in that double overtime victory. So it was kind of a feel-good story, a walk-on that kind of emerged. I think with so much of the attention being on Weaver and Horn right now, that's what's allowed Harrison to now emerge. But if they want to achieve their goals in conference play, Colorado's offense is going to start run the ball better. Right now, they're only averaging 61 yards per game on the ground. That ranks dead last in the conference, I think 120th nationally. So they just have not been able to consistently get that ground game. We did hear today, though, that Alton McCaskill IV, a transfer from Houston at running back, shed the no-contact jersey, and Coach Prime said he's ready to go. This was a guy that was a blue-chip transfer in that folks thought was going to be the feature back for the Buffs, but he was coming back from a torn ACL, and the staff decided to kind of bring him back a little bit slower. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him make his debut. The old line's going to need to get a little bit more of a push, though. It's not really on the back so far this season. The interior of Colorado's offensive line has kind of struggled to get that push in the ground game.
Defensively, let's shift over here for a second. Against Colorado State, they really struggled with the crossing routes. The passing game has had a lot of success against Colorado. But we've also seen this team, they're tied with the number of teams for the most turnovers forced in the country with 10. They've got 6 interceptions. They've got 4 forced fumble recoveries. Opportunistic defense here. Just what's your evaluation? What is going to be their strength? What do they hope to lean on? And what are the areas that they try to have teams avoid because they just aren't good at it?
Yeah, they do like to play an attacking style of defense. And so that does lend itself to them creating turnovers, but then they've given up a lot of big plays and they've struggled at times as a defense. I would say the Nebraska game was really the only performance you look to the defense and say they played up to their capabilities. It does look like, as much as they've struggled against other teams' ground attack, and I talk about Colorado is not running the football very well. They're not defending the run very well. That's got to change, obviously, as they get into Pac-12 against higher caliber teams like Oregon and USC here the next couple of weeks. But the run defense has a chance to get better now, I think, with Juju Mitchell kind of settling in. He was set to be a starting linebacker at Arizona State, but during preseason camp got booted from the team there. He landed at Colorado, and it took him a little bit of time just to get acclimated, but he's seen an increased role every game this season, and he's looked pretty good out there. So that's one area they might improve just because of him being out there going forward.
I was in the middle of making sure I get this name right. I've got a couple of players that I was curious on kind of what the deal is, because there were some really high profile transfers added this offseason. I just haven't seen as much as I expected in the box score. Savell Smalls from Washington was one, and then Demoy Kennedy from Alabama. I was just curious. These were guys that were really highly rated high school players that came with some notoriety, at least when they entered in the portal and landed at Colorado, and yet it doesn't look like they've carved out significant roles yet. Can you maybe speak to the situation with those two, and maybe if there are other players or if there's a bigger picture here thing that maybe I'm missing?
Yeah, Demoy Kennedy brings a lot of speed, and he was, starting at points in the preseason, but they really have liked what they've gotten out of Marvin Ham in a starting linebacker role. He was one of the few guys on last year's team that survived, and he's played well enough so far to keep that gig. Savell Smalls is a little bit buried on the depth chart. He did make a play in the Nebraska game, but it sounds like he's really good as a pass rusher, but isn't so great against the run. And Colorado's edge coach said, hey, you got to be able to do both. And they've got some other guys there that can do it. Jordan Dominic is a guy that has had quite a few tackles for a loss. Colorado hasn't consistently had the pass rush. They had it against Nebraska, but against TCU and Colorado State, they haven't done a good enough job of getting after the quarterback. When you just look at the ratio of how many times Shedeur Sanders has gotten hit versus how many times Colorado has hit the other quarterback, that's a ratio that is off right now, and it's in the favor of the opponent. So that's one other area. If they're going to continue to win games against tougher opponents, has got to get better.
You mentioned McCaskill. Obviously, most people know about Hunter, and I'm curious to hear kind of what the plan is in his absence, which it sounds like it'll be a couple of weeks at least. Are there any other injuries or any other players maybe returning that are worth acknowledging, or players that are going to miss this game?
Yeah, right now there's kind of a competition at cornerback. Kendrick Breedlove was the defensive back that saw an increased role with Travis Hunter out in the second half against Colorado State. Didn't play it particularly great, so he's in the mix there. Travis Jay, a transfer from Florida State, is in the mix there as well. So they're kind of letting them duke it out here. That would be a concern going into this game because Omarion Cooper at one of the cornerback spots is pretty solid, but that third spot has just been kind of unsettled here. Carter Stoutmeyer, a true freshman, is another guy. So they've got quite a few guys that they're kind of rotating in there to try to fill that void. But Coach Prime said it today. No one in the country is replacing Travis Hunter really on either side of the ball. So it's definitely going to be a downgrade. No offense to whoever does fill that void.
Just real quick here, what are the matchups you're excited to see play out? Whether it's, hey, this dude's just really good, I'm excited to see him play against this guy at Oregon who's really good. Or is there a certain position group that you're just like, oh man, this could decide the game one way or the other? Like, what are you excited to see play out on Saturday?
Well, I'm going to throw a curveball in here. I'm looking forward to seeing Nico Reed out there because obviously he's a former Buff, and it sounds like he's kind of a rotational piece in the secondary there.
Yeah, he rotates in. He's not a starter, but he plays every game.
He's the scrappy, competitive little guy. I enjoyed watching him at Colorado. He's a good athlete.
He's playing inside at slot as kind of a slot corner more than outside, it seems like, at least so far. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, Bo Nix, obviously, it's great to just see great quarterbacks duel it out. You're going to have two of the best quarterbacks in the country out there on the same field. That is probably the number one thing that I'm looking forward to.
I think last one for me here is just, what are some things you think are key for the Buffs to win this football game? And I guess just in general, what's the confidence level in Boulder coming into this game? 3-score favorites for Oregon. I'm sure part of that is the Travis Hunter injury, but is there a lot of confidence amongst the fan base that they can go 4-0? And I guess if they are to my original question, what are some things that have to happen?
Yeah, we haven't done our score predictions on our message board yet, so I am curious to see kind of how confident or pessimistic Colorado fans are going into this. Coach Prime has delivered on everything he said he was going to do at Colorado so far. So he's got a lot of believers, and he probably deserves them based on what we've seen out of this football team. But there are so many question marks. I talk about the rush offense, the run defense, which both rank dead last in the conference right now. The fact that Shedeur is just getting hit far too much right now. And then every unit's just been a little clunky at times, they really haven't put together a good full game yet. So, I think you've got to lean towards Oregon with the advantages they have out there. And so I wouldn't be able to pick Colorado to upset this, but I'm sure there's a lot of Colorado fans that are, because everything they've seen with Coach Prime is resulted in a W so far.
I've got one last question, and it's towards the future because unfortunately, Adam, I don't know when Colorado and we're going to play again. It sucks. Colorado's becomes a good story, and the Pac-12 has elite quarterbacks everywhere. 8 teams are ranked in the Pac-12, and then in 7 months, 6 months, poof, it's all gone, and we're down to the Pac-2. Big 12's off to the Big 12. Oregon is off to the Big 10. So my question here is just big picture. Deion Sanders, his time at Colorado, is it expected to be long? Because originally it was from outside the program's perspective, it looked like, oh, we'll wait until they have success. Some big school is going to come calling. He's immediately going to run. But it sounds like even as much as today, he's saying, no, my kids are coming back here next year. I don't want to go to the NFL. I want to be a college coach. And why would you leave Colorado if you're having this kind of success for when you're in the Big 12, when it's completely open with Oklahoma and Texas leaving and looking at what's left? Colorado could be the king real quick. Just what are your thoughts on just long-term Deion Sanders and where this program ceiling could be? Could they be back to competing for national championships in a couple of years, you feel like?
Well, first off, I think that if Coach Prime gets into the college football playoff and makes a run there, makes him look like a lot more of a transformational type coach doing it at Colorado than if he bolted Boulder and then went to a program, I don't know, a program that's obviously more established, maybe down in the SEC. So I don't know. I'm not in Coach Prime's head, so I can't really predict the future, but I do know that, there's people that feel confident that he's going to be around for maybe 5 years, and who knows where it goes from there. Colorado has a lot to offer. I have a lot of beat writers that tell me that's one of their favorite trips. It was kind of perplexing that they were as awful as they were for so long. Don't have the recruiting base. That definitely hurts. But when you have Coach Prime in his presence, you can overcome that. So I don't know. I can't predict the future. I tell Colorado fans to just not worry about that. There's going to be a lot of rumors about that going forward. Just enjoy this experience if you're a Colorado fan, and don't think too far down the road, because they've been waiting for excitement like this for a very long time.
Yeah, it means a good thing if there's rumors around your coach being pursued by other schools. It means you're doing something right, and Deion Sanders in Colorado clearly are doing something right. Adam, thank you for coming on the show. We will wait your arrival in Eugene here in a couple of days. We'll catch up in the press box, and hopefully we get served up a really good, entertaining game.
Yeah, well, that's why I pulled out the Pac-12, which is I was joking with you guys. It's soon to be vintage gear here. I'm kind of bummed out. It's sad thinking that this might be the last trip to Eugene, and hopefully some of these old Pac-12 schools can start scheduling non-conference games, because I'm going to miss, and a lot of the colleagues, I enjoy bumping into you guys in the press box or at Pac-12 Media Day. We have a great team on 24/7 Sports in the Pac-12.
Absolutely. And you've been listening to the Odds and Audibles podcast. We'll catch you later. Thanks, folks.